He was not lying beside that broken fence because he had given up. He was lying there because somewhere beyond it, something still needed to be found. Before the sun reached the tree line over rural Virginia, Captain Noah Whitaker was driving alone down County Road 17, the kind of narrow back road that had no shoulder, no streetlights, and no reason to be traveled unless a man was either going home or trying not to. The morning was cold enough to silver the grass along the ditches, and a pale mist clung low over the fields, turning every fence post into a ghost of itself. Noah kept both hands on the wheel of his old dark blue pickup, his Marine Corps jacket folded on the passenger seat, his coffee untouched in the cup holder. He had been awake since 3:40 a.m., the hour his body still believed belonged to patrols, radio checks, and bad news whispered through static. At 38, he looked younger from a distance and older up close. White-skinned, broad-shouldered, with close-cut brown hair and gray-blue eyes that missed very little, Noah carried himself with the quiet discipline of a man who had learned long ago that panic never saved anyone. But there was a tiredness beneath it. Not weakness. Wait. The kind that settles in a man after too many names are folded into flags. Too many good dogs are remembered by empty leashes. He was less than 10 miles outside a small town called Briar Glen when his headlights caught the fence. It stood along the right side of the road, once painted white, now weathered gray by years of rain and summer heat. One section had split open near the bottom rail, the boards cracked outward, jagged but not fresh enough to shine. Noah slowed without knowing why. Then he saw the body beside it. At first, it looked like a pile of wet burlap dropped in the weeds. Then one ear moved. Noah braked hard enough for the truck tires to whisper across damp gravel. For a second he just sat there, engine idling, breath held in his chest. The shape lifted its head. A German Shepherd. Big. Male, maybe 6 years old. Sable coat dark along the spine, lighter around the chest, soaked with dew and streaked with mud. His muzzle had the first faint ash of age, and one front leg was tucked beneath him at an angle that made Noah's stomach tighten. But it was the eyes that made him open the door. Amber. Awake. Watching. Not wild. Not lost. Trained. Noah stepped out slowly, boots sinking into the soft edge of the road. The air smelled of wet cedar, rusted wire, and cold earth. Somewhere far off, a crow called once and went silent. The shepherd did not bark. He did not try to run. He only raised his head higher, as if the effort cost him everything, and fixed his gaze not on Noah's face, but on the space behind him, past the ruined fence and into the gray field beyond. Easy, boy, Noah said, his voice low, the way he had spoken to dogs under louder skies than this one. I see you. The dog's ears twitched at the sound. A tremor ran through his shoulders. Noah took one step closer. The shepherd's lips parted, not in a snarl, but in a thin, exhausted breath. Around his neck was a leather collar, old but not cheap. The tag ring was still there. The tag itself was gone, torn away so cleanly it left only a bright scrape in the metal. Noah stopped. Something cold moved through him that had nothing to do with the morning. Who took your name? He whispered. The dog gave a faint sound, not quite a whine, not quite a warning. Noah crouched about 6 feet away and held out his hand, palm down. The shepherd sniffed the air. His nose quivered. For a moment, Noah saw another dog in the space between them. Atlas, black-faced and steady, waiting for a command in a place where every shadow had meant danger. Noah swallowed hard and pushed the memory down where he kept the rest. I'm not going to hurt you, he said, but I need to look at that leg. He shifted closer. That was when the shepherd moved. Not fast, not strong, but with a purpose so sharp it stopped Noah in place. The dog dragged himself forward and caught the cuff of Noah's sleeve gently between his teeth. No pressure, no bite, just a hold. A plea. Noah froze. The shepherd's eyes did not leave his. Then, with the last of his strength, the dog pulled once, weakly, away from the road and toward the broken fence. Noah followed the motion with his eyes. Behind the shattered boards, the grass was flattened in a narrow trail. The dirt beneath the bottom rail had been clawed open, scraped into dark ribbons. Bits of sable fur clung to the splintered wood. There was mud on the inside of the fence, not the outside. Noah's breath slowed. The fence had not been broken by something trying to get in. It had been broken by something desperate to get out. The shepherd released his sleeve and lowered his head, trembling. But even then, even half collapsed in the cold grass, he kept his body angled toward the field, as if guarding a doorway no one else could see. Noah stood very still, listening to the soft tick of his cooling engine, the whisper of fog through dead weeds, the uneven breath of the dog at his feet. Then he looked beyond the fence, into the pale, waiting morning, and understood the first truth of that day. This canine had not escaped to save himself. He had escaped to bring someone back. Noah did not carry the shepherd at first. He knew better. A frightened dog could mistake mercy for danger, and this one was not merely frightened. He was holding himself together by the thin, invisible thread of duty. So Noah moved the way he had been taught to move around wounded partners, slowly, with every gesture announced before it happened. He took the wool blanket from behind the truck seat, knelt in the grass, and let the dog smell it. The shepherd watched him with those amber eyes, breathing shallow but steady, as if measuring the man not by his words, but by the silence between them. "I have got you," Noah murmured. "We will come back. I promise." At the word promise, the dog's ears lifted a fraction. Maybe it was only the tone. Maybe it was memory. Noah slid one arm beneath the broad chest, the other under the hips, careful of the injured leg. The shepherd tensed, then sagged against him with a weight that was all bone, muscle, mud, and stubborn life. He was heavier than he looked, close to 80 pounds, but Noah did not feel the strain until he reached the truck. What he felt was the old ache in his ribs, the remembered pressure of carrying Atlas out of smoke and dust. The terrible quiet afterward when a leash hangs empty and every command in the world becomes useless. He placed the shepherd across the back seat and wrapped the blanket around him. The dog tried once to lift his head toward the field. Noah saw it in the mirror. "I said we are coming back," he told him. "But you have to stay alive long enough to show me why." The nearest clinic was 9 miles away, a small brick building on the south edge of Briar Glen with a faded sign that read Carter Animal Care. The road there curved past soybean fields and sleeping farmhouses, past mailbox flags still down, past a white church with its steeple barely visible through the fog. The shepherd did not make a sound the whole way. Not when the truck hit potholes. Not when a delivery van passed too close. Not when the radio, still set low from the night before, crackled with a weather alert about frost in the valley. He simply watched the rear window, eyes fixed on the direction of the broken fence until distance swallowed it. Dr. Emily Carter was unlocking the clinic door when Noah pulled into the gravel lot. She turned at the sound of the truck and immediately stopped smiling. Emily was 34, white-skinned, tall and lean, with ash-blonde hair twisted into a low knot and tired brown eyes that could soften around an animal before they softened around a person. She wore a navy fleece over scrubs and carried a paper cup of coffee that began steaming into the cold morning air. "Noah," she called. He had known her for almost 2 years, mostly through veterans events and the occasional injured farm dog someone brought in after hours. She had the calm of someone raised around both grief and responsibility. Her father had been a Marine. Men like Noah did not have to explain much to her. "I found him off County Road 17, Noah said, opening the back door. "German Shepherd. Male. Trained. Hurt leg. No tag." Emily stepped closer, and the dog's eyes shifted to her hands. Not her face. Her hands. She noticed. "That is not a stray habit," she said softly. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic, clean towels, and dry kibble. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, but Emily kept the exam room lamp dim. Noah lifted the shepherd onto the padded table while Emily spoke to him in a low, even voice. The dog did not resist, yet he never stopped tracking the door, the hallway, the windows, every possible exit. His collar left a rubbed line in the fur at his neck. The leather had been cut and re-sewn at least once. Emily ran a scanner between his shoulder blades, then again along both sides. Nothing. She frowned and tried a third time. Still nothing. "No readable microchip," she said. Noah looked at the torn tag ring. Could it have failed? It could, Emily said, but her voice changed. Or someone made sure it would not answer. She cleaned the mud from his front leg. The injury was not fresh enough to be from a single fall, and not old enough to be forgotten. His paw pads were scraped from digging. His nails were cracked at the tips. There were shallow pressure marks where a restraint had sat too long, hidden beneath the thick fur. Emily worked quietly, but Noah saw her jaw tighten. Whoever had him did not want him identified, she said, and they did not expect him to make it far. The shepherd turned his head at a sound from the hallway. A child laughed somewhere in the waiting room, bright and brief, probably a little girl arriving early with a cat carrier. The reaction was immediate. The dog's whole body went still. His ears rose. His eyes widened with something that was not fear. Recognition. Longing almost. He tried to push himself upright, injured leg trembling beneath him. Noah placed a hand gently against his shoulder. Easy. The shepherd let out a low, broken sound and looked toward the hallway as if a door inside him had opened. Emily stopped wrapping the bandage. Noah, she whispered. He knows that sound. Noah stared at the dog, then at the empty tag ring, then down at the mud drying on his own sleeve where the shepherd had pulled him toward the fence. The clinic seemed to grow quieter around them. Outside, morning light finally touched the windows, pale and uncertain. On the exam table, the nameless K9 lowered his head again, but his eyes stayed fixed on the hall where the child's voice had faded. Noah felt the shape of the mystery shift. This dog had not only lost a name, he had lost someone small enough for a laugh to bring him back to life. Noah followed the shepherd closely as they stepped out of the clinic. The morning air crisp with frost and the lingering scent of wet asphalt and pine from the surrounding forest. The dog moved with a careful, deliberate pace, keeping his body low and ears alert, occasionally glancing back at Noah to ensure he was following. They drove slowly along the winding country road, the truck tires crunching over frost-hardened gravel and the occasional patch of ice that had not yet melted in the pale light. Every field they passed seemed empty, yet the shepherd scanned the edges of the tree lines, his amber eyes flicking with a focus that suggested memories of places only he could understand. Noah kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on the edge of the seat closest to the dog, feeling the subtle shifts in weight as the shepherd adjusted himself on the blanket, muscles taut and ready, as though he knew more than any person in the cab. He noticed the scratches along the fence boards in the mirror, the faint traces of fur, and the tiny divots in the dirt where the dog had clawed at the ground before he was rescued. The evidence was there, but Noah did not need it to know that this dog had been guarding something precious, something unseen, and that the journey they were on was only beginning. They reached the edge of a dense grove of hardwoods where the morning fog hung like curtains and filtered the sunlight into muted shafts that danced across the road. The shepherd's gaze became fixed on a point beyond the trees, and Noah could sense the shift in tension in the animal's body, a silent signal that the trail they were following was about to reveal more than he anticipated. As they approached a bend, the sound of distant water running through a ditch caught Noah's attention, faint but steady, and he realized the dog had led them toward the remnants of a small creek that wound along the far edge of the property they had first spotted. Ranger stopped at the bank, sniffing the air, and for a moment, Noah thought he might refuse to go further, but then the dog shifted his stance and let out a single, low sound, almost a hum, a direction rather than a call, urging Noah to continue. The trees parted slightly to reveal a neglected outbuilding, wooden planks warped and sun-bleached, the roof sagging under the weight of moss and debris, and behind it a patch of earth where the frost had melted, leaving damp, dark soil. Ranger stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, pawing at the dirt with measured taps, his body coiled as if preparing for a moment that only he could anticipate. Noah knelt beside him, the cold seeping through his jeans, and saw the faint outline of a box, weathered and half-buried. He reached down, brushing away the wet leaves and clumps of dirt, revealing a small tin container, rusted at the seams but intact. Ranger sat back on his haunches, eyes never leaving the box, tail resting lightly on the ground but quivering with restrained energy. Noah opened the container with careful fingers. Inside were remnants of collars, faded photographs of a boy and a dog, and a small, folded piece of paper, edges curled and worn. The writing was childlike, uneven, and yet the message was unmistakable, a bond remembered, a secret protected, a history preserved. Ranger lowered his head toward the container, nose brushing the paper as if confirming the truth of what Noah held, and Noah felt the weight of the morning settle in his chest. The air was silent except for the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a crow, and the faint, steady heartbeat of the dog at his side. Noah understood then that this was more than a rescue. It was the uncovering of a story that had waited for the right moment, the right person, and the right heart to recognize it. Ranger stood slowly, body still taut with attention, and nudged Noah lightly with his nose, directing him toward the grove once more, toward the place the dog had been protecting all along. Noah followed without question, realizing that the quiet resolve in those amber eyes was guiding him toward a truth that could only be discovered together, man and dog, step by careful step, in the soft light of a morning that promised revelations beyond the broken fence and the forgotten fields. Noah followed Ranger through the narrow path between the grove and the creek, the morning sun casting muted beams through the fog, turning each droplet of dew on the leaves into tiny prisms. The dog moved with a precision that suggested he had memorized every inch of this terrain, his paw prints leaving shallow impressions in the soft, damp soil, each step deliberate, measured, as though he were retracing a map only he could read. Noah kept a steady pace, one hand resting lightly on the steering wheel of the small utility cart they had borrowed from the clinic, the other occasionally reaching to reassure the dog with a gentle touch. Ranger's amber eyes never left the direction of the creek, flicking to Noah only briefly, almost to confirm that he was still being followed. As they reached the water's edge, Noah noticed the way the sunlight reflected off the shallow ripples, glinting against small stones and fallen branches, creating an almost surreal shimmer over the ground. Ranger halted for a moment, lowering his head to sniff a particular section of the bank, then padded forward again, nudging Noah to stop the cart and follow him on foot. Noah obeyed, stepping carefully over exposed roots and moss-covered rocks, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. Ahead, partially hidden by a tangle of vines and reeds, was the outline of a small, old storage shed, its paint faded to a pale gray, shingles warped, doors slightly ajar. Ranger's posture stiffened, tail lowering to a cautious but purposeful angle, and his ears perked as if he sensed something unseen within. Noah crouched beside him, noticing how the dog's body tensed in a way that signaled both anticipation and a protective instinct, a silent communication that required no words. He could feel the faint heat of Ranger's body through the thick blanket they had wrapped him in, the tremor of muscle beneath fur still tight from fear and instinct. Carefully, Noah stepped closer to the shed, listening to the creak of the boards beneath his boots and the soft rustle of wind through the overgrown grass. Ranger's gaze never wavered, scanning the shadows within the doorway, waiting. Noah reached for the handle of the door, his fingers brushing the cool metal, and with a gentle push, it opened with a soft groan. Inside, the dim light revealed the faint shapes of old crates stacked against the walls, the floor covered in dry leaves and dust, and in the corner, a small patch of disturbed earth where the soil had been recently shifted. Ranger padded forward, nose low, sniffing at the ground, and then glancing up at Noah as though urging him to understand. He knelt beside the patch of earth and began to dig carefully with his front paws, not hastily, but with an intentional rhythm, uncovering a shallow wooden box hidden beneath. Noah's breath caught as he crouched closer. The box was old, water-stained, its hinges rusted but intact. Ranger sat back on his haunches, eyes fixed on the box, body still taut with anticipation, ears forward, waiting for Noah to act. With deliberate care, Noah lifted the lid, revealing a collection of objects inside, a worn dog tag, frayed leather straps, and a faded photograph of a young boy and a German shepherd together, smiling in the sunlight. The paper at the bottom of the box was creased and delicate, the ink smudged in places but still legible. A child's handwriting, a name and a date. A simple message that spoke volumes about the bond that had been protected and the secret that had been kept all this time. Ranger rested his muzzle lightly on the edge of the box, and Noah felt a quiet intensity in that touch, a silent confirmation that this discovery was what the dog had been guiding him toward. Outside, the fog began to lift, sunlight creeping through the trees, casting a soft glow over the creek and the grove, illuminating the path they had followed together. Noah stood, brushing dust from his jacket, and looked down at Ranger, whose eyes met his with a calm, unwavering focus. There was a moment of stillness, the kind that exists between action and realization, where the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Noah understood then that this dog had not only survived the night, but it carried the memory, the secret, and the hope of a connection that neither time nor distance could erase. He reached down, gently ruffling Ranger's fur along his neck, feeling the warmth and the quiet strength that had guided them both to this point. And in that silent morning, with dew glinting on leaves and the soft gurgle of the creek beside them, Noah knew that this was only the beginning of understanding the story Ranger had led him to uncover. Noah did not touch the photograph again for almost a full minute. He only stared at it, letting the soft morning light reveal what the dust had tried to hide. The boy in the picture could not have been more than 9 years old, thin and pale, with sandy brown hair falling over his forehead and a smile too bright for the tiredness in his face. He sat on the steps of a small white farmhouse with Ranger pressed against his side, the dog younger than, ears tall, coat clean, eyes fixed on the child, as if the whole world had narrowed to that one fragile heartbeat. Behind them stood a Marine in dress blues, tall, white-skinned, straight-backed, one hand resting on the boy's shoulder, the other on Ranger's head. Noah knew that posture before he knew the man's name. It was the posture of someone trying to look strong for a family photograph, while already carrying a goodbye inside his chest. On the back of the picture, written in faded blue ink, were 3 words and a date. Caleb, Ranger, Dad. Noah read it twice. Ranger gave a low breath beside him, then nudged the box with his nose until the dog tag shifted in the bottom. Noah picked it up carefully. It was not whole. One half of the tag had been snapped away, leaving only part of the name and a service number scratched by age and dirt. He could read Morrison, United States Marine Corps. The rest was missing. The tin box also held a small plastic medical bracelet, the kind hospitals place on a child's wrist, curled like a forgotten question. The printed name was faded but clear enough. Caleb Morrison. Date of birth. Allergies. Cardiac patient. Noah felt the air leave his lungs slowly. This was no random hiding place. This was a memory vault. A child had left proof behind, or Ranger had guarded it after the child was gone. Outside the shed, the creek moved quietly over stones, as if the world did not know what had just been uncovered. Noah took out his phone, but there was only one bar of signal. He photographed the items, then called Deputy Cole Harris. The line crackled twice before Cole answered, his voice thick with early morning caution. Whitaker, tell me this is not about the dog again. Noah looked down at Ranger, whose eyes had returned to the photograph. It is about a boy now. That was all it took. 20 minutes later, Cole's cruiser rolled up near the broken fence, its tires whispering over wet gravel. Cole Harris stepped out in a brown county jacket, white-skinned, broad-faced, mid-40s, with a calm expression that had probably settled arguments in church parking lots and convenience stores for half his life. He was not a man who enjoyed drama, but he was a man who respected evidence. Noah showed him the fence first. The scraped dirt, the hair caught on the splintered rail, the trail through the grass. Then he led him to the shed and opened the box. Cole removed his hat without meaning to. That is a Marine's tag, he said quietly. Half of one. And a child's hospital bracelet. Cole crouched, using a gloved hand to turn the photograph toward the light. His face changed when he read the name. Morrison, he murmured. I know that name. Noah looked at him. From where? Cole stood slowly, eyes narrowing toward the far end of the property where a larger building sat beyond a line of dead vines. 3 years ago, a staff sergeant named Daniel Morrison passed away after coming home from deployment. Good man, from what folks said. His wife, Anna, stayed out near Briar Glen with their son. Quiet family, kept to themselves after the funeral. Ranger's ears lifted at the sound of the name Daniel. Not sharply, gently, like a candle catching a draft. Noah noticed. So did Cole. Where are they now? Noah asked. Cole's mouth tightened. The wife died in a car accident the following winter. The boy went into county care. After that, I heard he was placed somewhere near Richmond for medical treatment. The dog was listed missing around the same time. The shed seemed to shrink around them. Noah looked again at the photo. Child, Marine, dog. Sunlight. A whole life reduced to objects in a rusted box. Missing, Noah said. The word did not fit the way Ranger stood there, steady and watchful, as if he had never been missing from anything. As if everyone else had simply stopped looking in the right direction. Cole turned toward the back wall of the shed. This property belongs to Martinvale now. Private canine training contractor. Security dogs, obedience programs, protection work. He bought the land about 2 years ago. Noah followed his gaze to the larger building beyond the trees. It looked too clean compared to the shed, with fresh gravel in the drive and a locked steel gate beside a row of trimmed hedges. A place made to look respectable from the road. Ranger stepped in front of Noah then, not afraid, not angry, but certain. His injured leg trembled beneath the bandage, yet he stood between the men and the far building as though warning them that the truth lived there, polished and hidden behind good paint. Cole spoke softly into his radio, asking dispatch to check records connected to Caleb Morrison, Daniel Morrison, and Martin Vale. Noah said nothing. He only knelt beside Ranger and placed the half-dog tag in front of him. The shepherd lowered his muzzle to it, closed his eyes for one brief second, and breathed in the scent of a name no one had spoken to him in years. When his eyes opened again, they were fixed not on Noah, not on Cole, not on the tin box, but on the locked gate beyond the trees. And Noah understood the second truth of that morning. Ranger had not led him to the past. He had led him to the door where the past had been buried alive. Noah and Cole stood for a moment, taking in the locked gate beyond the trees, the morning sun cutting through the fog in long, pale beams that glimmered on the dewdrops along the fence line. Ranger remained rigid, ears forward, tail still, his gaze locked on the steel bars, as if he could sense what lay beyond more clearly than any human present. Noah crouched beside him, placing his hand lightly on the dog's flank, feeling the muscles tense and release beneath the fur, a quiet rhythm that spoke of years of training, loyalty, and silent vigilance. "We are going to need a plan," Noah said softly, not looking up. Cole nodded, scanning the perimeter of the property, noting the trimmed hedges, the fresh gravel in the driveway, and the absence of any vehicles. "No cameras visible yet. Could be more inside, but for now, we have Ranger's lead." Ranger gave a soft exhale, moving a step forward, then stopping abruptly, nose twitching toward a narrow side path that led around the corner of the building. Noah stood and followed, boots sinking slightly into the moist earth, leaves sticking to the soles, the cold air sharp against his face. The dog patted ahead, then glanced back, amber eyes meeting Noah's, a silent command to keep pace but not interfere. They followed the narrow path to a side door that was slightly ajar, hinges rusted, the paint peeling in long vertical strips. Noah approached slowly, hand hovering near the handle. Ranger crouched, low to the ground, and sniffed the air around the door. His gaze was alert but not anxious, calculating the space beyond as if he had done it many times before. Noah pushed the door open quietly, revealing a dim interior, the faint scent of old wood and dust hanging thick. Sunlight fell in scattered patches through the gaps in the roof and walls, illuminating stacked crates, worn blankets, and the faint outlines of small containers along the far wall. Ranger moved forward carefully, nose down, paws soft against the wooden floor. Noah followed, breathing shallow, aware of the silence that seemed almost sacred, the quiet punctuated only by the dog's occasional breath and the distant sound of wind through broken windows. In the far corner, Ranger stopped abruptly, standing rigid, ears pricked, tail lifted slightly, body coiled like a spring. Noah stepped closer and saw the first signs of disturbance. A patch of floor where the dust had been brushed away, subtle imprints of paws and small footprints that had been there for a while, faded but distinct. Ranger nosed the edge of a crate, then pawed at it lightly. Noah knelt beside the dog, brushing his fingers over the worn wood, feeling the texture, the dents, the evidence of something hidden beneath. Carefully, Ranger moved aside a blanket, revealing a small latch on a panel of the crate. Noah bent down, examining the mechanism. It was old, rusted, but functional. He eased the latch open, and the panel swung upward with a faint creak, revealing a shallow compartment inside. Within were objects arranged with a deliberate care that suggested memory, preservation, and perhaps hope. A small dog tag, frayed and partially obscured by dirt. A child's hospital bracelet, curled at the edges. A faded photograph showing a boy with a younger German Shepherd, both smiling, a sunlit field behind them. Noah picked up the photograph carefully, feeling the weight of the history contained in the small rectangle of paper. Ranger rested his muzzle lightly against Noah's hand, eyes focused on the box, body still alert. Noah noticed faint markings in the dust around the compartment, as if someone or something had returned to this spot repeatedly, preserving the items, checking on them, making sure they remained hidden but accessible to those who knew where to look. "This is more than a shed," Noah whispered to Cole, who had joined him quietly behind. Cole nodded, expression grave, taking in the evidence and the pattern of care despite neglect. "A guardian," he said softly. "The dog has been the guardian all along." Ranger gave a low, almost imperceptible hum of agreement, tail brushing the floor, ears forward, standing between the men and the rest of the room. Noah rose slowly, leaving the photograph and bracelet in the compartment, closing the latch carefully, and turning his gaze back to Ranger. The dog exhaled a long, steady breath and stepped toward the side door, head held high, body moving with purpose, nudging Noah to follow once more. The early morning light had strengthened, cutting through the dust motes in the air, and Noah understood that Ranger was not leading him to the past anymore. He was leading him to the next step, a doorway where the secrets of the boy, the dog, and the history they shared could finally be uncovered. Every careful step through the narrow path toward the main building beyond the trees felt measured, deliberate, as though the fog, the frost, and the distant call of a crow were all witnesses to a story waiting to be revealed. Ranger paused at the edge of the gravel drive, amber eyes sweeping the horizon, then looked back at Noah, as if to say that he would not move a paw until Noah understood what needed to happen next. Noah took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill his lungs, and followed the dog, knowing that the morning, the light, and the quiet were all aligning for a revelation that had been protected for years by pause, patience, and unwavering loyalty. Noah approached the main building cautiously, the gravel under his boots crunching softly in the quiet morning. Ranger moved ahead, leading with measured steps, ears perked, tail low but steady, eyes scanning every shadow and opening. The sunlight had strengthened, cutting across the driveway in thin golden lines that highlighted the fresh paint on the walls and the neatly trimmed hedges surrounding the property, giving the place an air of care and order that felt almost too deliberate. Noah noted the locked steel gate and the absence of vehicles, the kind of silence that suggested someone was expecting no visitors. Ranger paused at the edge of the gravel, looking back at Noah as if to ensure he was following, then nosed the ground along a faint trail that ran beside the building, partially concealed by creeping ivy. Noah followed, boots crunching, eyes scanning the gaps in the siding for any sign of life inside. As they rounded the corner, they came to a side entrance, a solid wooden door slightly worn but with a modern lock, and Ranger stopped again, placing a paw gently against the door as though instructing Noah to listen before acting. Noah bent close to the handle, feeling the cool metal under his fingers, and exhaled slowly, steadying himself. Ranger's body was taut, muscles coiled, tail brushing lightly against the ground. Noah pushed the door open quietly, revealing a large room filled with the faint scent of leather, varnish, and a hint of dog hair. The interior was arranged methodically, training equipment along the walls, crates neatly stacked, a few scattered blankets, and in the far corner, a small table with papers and folders. Ranger immediately moved toward the corner, sniffing the ground, nose low, tail rigid. Noah followed, kneeling beside him, seeing the disturbed dust on the floor, footprints of paws and boots, and the subtle indentation of a small handprint, barely noticeable but present. On the table, a folder had been left open, its contents partially visible. Documents with the name Caleb Morrison, addresses, dates, and notations that suggested careful tracking and a history being kept hidden. Ranger nosed at the folder, then looked back at Noah, head slightly tilted, as though confirming that this was what he had led them to find. Noah picked up the folder, flipping through the pages carefully. Each entry revealed fragments of a story. A child moved from home to home, medical appointments, mentions of a dog previously assigned to a Marine family, and notes about a man named Martin Vale overseeing canine placements. Noah felt the tension in the room tighten, the quiet settling in a way that made the air feel heavier, charged with anticipation. Ranger shifted slightly, stepping closer, pressing his body lightly against Noah's knee, eyes never leaving the table. Noah looked around, realizing the room was filled with the signs of careful concealment, crates labeled with numbers, floors swept, papers organized to avoid casual discovery. Someone had intended to hide this past, to control access to information that mattered deeply to the boy and the dog. Ranger gave a low, intentional hum, moving toward the side wall where a small door was partially obscured by a stack of crates. Noah followed, crouching beside the dog. Ranger pawed lightly at the door, nose twitching, signaling the location of something hidden beyond it. Noah gently pushed the door open, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into dimness, faint light spilling upward from a small grate at the bottom. The air was cooler, carrying the earthy scent of stone and old wood. Ranger stepped carefully down the stairs, ears twitching at every sound, tail low but firm. Noah followed, taking deliberate steps to match the dog's pace, breathing shallow, aware of the importance of each moment. At the bottom of the stairs was a small subterranean space, walls lined with shelving, filled with boxes, papers, and several crates, some marked with the faded remnants of dog tags and identification. Ranger approached one crate in particular, sniffing the air, then pawing at the latch. Noah knelt beside him, opening the crate with care, revealing items preserved with care, dog collars, tags, photographs of Caleb Morrison with a younger German Shepherd, and a small medical bracelet, the same as found in the tin box earlier. Ranger rested his muzzle gently against Noah's hand, eyes soft but intense, guiding him to see the connections the dog had been protecting all along. Noah picked up a photograph, the sunlight from the grate illuminating the smiling face of the boy and the dog, capturing a moment in time that held more weight than any report or document ever could. He exhaled slowly, absorbing the quiet significance of the discovery, and understood that Ranger had led him not only to a hidden history, but to a truth that had been preserved through vigilance, patience, and unwavering loyalty. Outside, the morning continued to brighten, casting long shadows and revealing the subtle textures of the building and the surrounding land. But inside the subterranean space, time seemed to pause, holding Noah, Ranger, and the story that had been kept safe, waiting to be revealed, all together in the hush of discovery. The basement held its breath around them while Noah laid the documents across the small metal table beneath the grate of morning light. Dust drifted in that pale beam like ash from an old memory, settling on photographs, training records, hospital forms, and the careful handwriting of people who had treated a child as a case number when he had once been somebody's whole world. Ranger stayed close to Noah's left side, his bandaged leg trembling now and then, but he refused to sit until Noah touched his shoulder and whispered, "Stand down, boy." Only then did the shepherd lower himself to the floor, though his eyes never stopped watching the stairs. Cole photographed every page, every collar, every tag, his usual small-town steadiness replaced by something quieter and heavier. "This is enough to open a formal investigation," he said, but his voice did not carry triumph. It carried sorrow. Noah understood why. Evidence could prove where a dog had been kept. It could prove names had been hidden. It could prove a man had treated loyalty like property. But evidence could not answer the question burning behind Ranger's amber eyes. Where was Caleb? Cole stepped outside to call dispatch, and the signal finally came through clear. Noah stayed in the basement with Ranger and the open file. On one page, there was a placement note from 2 years earlier. Caleb Morrison, temporary medical foster care, Richmond Children's Heart Center, transfer pending. The date had been updated only 6 weeks ago. Noah read it once, then again, feeling something in him go still. 6 weeks ago meant the boy was not just a memory. He was not a faded photograph in a tin box. He was somewhere under fluorescent lights, listening to machines, perhaps still asking for a dog everyone told him was gone. Noah took out his phone and called Emily Carter. She answered on the second ring. "Is he all right?" she asked before anything else. Noah looked down at Ranger, who had lifted his head at the sound of her voice through the speaker. "He is standing because he refuses not to," Noah said. "I need you to check something." Caleb Morrison, pediatric cardiac patient, Richmond Children's Heart Center. "Can you find out if he is there?" There was a brief silence, then the sound of Emily moving, keys clicking, her breath tightening in the way it had when she saw the torn collar. "Noah," she said softly, "give me a minute." Ranger pushed himself up before she returned to the line. He did not bark. He did not whine. He only stared at the phone, as if some part of him understood that the thin black object in Noah's hand might carry the scent of an answer. When Emily spoke again, her voice had changed. He is there. He was admitted 4 days ago after complications. He is stable, but weak. Noah. The file says he repeatedly asks for a German shepherd named Ranger. The name landed in the room with a force no shout could have matched. Ranger stepped forward, ears high, body trembling from nose to tail. Noah closed his eyes. For a second, not because he doubted it, because some truths arrive so gently they hurt more than thunder. We are going to Richmond, Noah said. By the time they reached the hospital, the day had turned bright and cold, with sunlight flashing off glass buildings and parked cars in the visitor lot. Richmond Children's Heart Center rose beside a row of bare maple trees, its entrance lined with small flags, painted rocks, and paper hearts taped inside the windows. Ranger walked beside Noah on a temporary support harness Emily had fitted before they left, his bandaged leg protected, his pace slow but determined. Nurses stopped when they saw him. A security guard opened his mouth to speak, then looked at Noah's military identification, Cole's badge, Emily's letter, and finally at the dog's face. Whatever rule he had planned to quote faded before it became words. They moved through polished halls that smelled of disinfectant, warm laundry, and cafeteria coffee. Somewhere a cartoon played softly from a waiting room television. Somewhere a child laughed, then coughed, then laughed again. Ranger's ears flicked toward every sound, but he did not pull. Not until they reached the pediatric cardiac wing. Then he stopped. His nose lifted. His eyes changed. Noah felt it through the leash. That sudden current of recognition traveling from animal to man like a prayer, finding its way back to the mouth that first spoke it. At the end of the hall, behind a half-open door, a boy's voice whispered something too faint for Noah to catch. A nurse stepped aside. Caleb Morrison lay in a hospital bed near the window, small beneath a blue blanket patterned with stars. He was white-skinned, thin, sandy-haired, with cheeks pale from illness and eyes half-closed against the morning light. A clear tube ran beneath his nose, and a monitor beside him made soft, steady sounds like distant raindrops. Noah did not speak. Ranger stood at the doorway, frozen. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then Caleb's fingers moved on top of the blanket. Weakly, almost by memory alone, he shaped his lips and gave 3 soft whistles. Not loud, not perfect. 3 broken notes. Ranger made a sound Noah had never heard from a trained dog before, a breath that seemed to come from the oldest room in his heart. He crossed the floor slowly, gently, as if approaching holy ground, and placed his head against Caleb's chest exactly where the boy's hand had been waiting. Caleb's eyes opened. His fingers curled into the fur behind Ranger's ear. "You came back," he whispered. Noah turned away just enough to let the moment belong to them, but not far enough to miss the small miracle. On the table beside Caleb's bed lay half of a marine dog tag, worn smooth from years in a child's palm. Noah reached into his pocket and touched the other half, the piece Ranger had guarded beneath the broken fence, and understood why the dog had refused to die quietly in the grass. He had not been searching for rescue. He had been keeping a promise. Caleb slept for almost an hour with one hand resting in Ranger's fur, and no one in the room had the heart to move it. The monitor beside the bed kept its soft, steady rhythm. Sunlight warmed the windowsill. Outside the glass, bare maple branches stirred in a light Virginia wind, tapping gently as if asking permission to enter. Noah stood near the door with his arms folded, not in command, not on guard, but quietly present, the way some men stand when they are trying to hold themselves together without making a sound. Emily adjusted Ranger's support wrap and checked the bandage on his leg, her touch gentle enough that the dog barely opened his eyes. Cole spoke in low tones with a hospital administrator in the hallway, passing along records, photographs, and the evidence found beneath the old property. By noon, the investigation had widened. By evening, Martin Vale's training operation had been shut down, and the dogs still under his control were moved to licensed care. There was no shouting when it happened, no grand scene, no satisfying thunder. Just paperwork, quiet phone calls, doors opening, and several tired animals finally led into clean light. Sometimes justice does not arrive like a storm. Sometimes it arrives wearing a county jacket, holding a clipboard, speaking softly so the frightened do not flinch. Noah did not see Vale again that day, and he was grateful for it. His mind remained in the hospital room, where a boy and a dog breathed in time with each other as if they had been doing it all their lives. When Caleb woke, his first words were not for the doctors, not for food, not even for water. "Where is the other half?" he whispered. Noah knew. He took the broken piece of Daniel Morrison's dog tag from his pocket and placed it on the blanket beside the half Caleb had kept through every foster home, every hospital stay, every lonely night when adults said they were trying their best and still could not bring back what mattered. The two pieces did not fit perfectly anymore. Time had worn the edges. Dirt had dulled the metal. But when Caleb pushed them together with trembling fingers, the name became whole enough to read. Daniel Morrison, United States Marine Corps. Caleb looked at it for a long moment, then pressed both halves against Ranger's head. "Dad told him to watch me," he said. His voice was small, but it did not break. Noah felt something inside his chest loosen and ache at the same time. Ranger closed his eyes, accepting the dog tag against his fur like a medal he had never asked to wear. In the weeks that followed, the story moved through Briar Glen quietly at first, then all at once. The broken fence was removed from Vale's property, but Noah kept one piece of it, the splintered white rail with the marks where Ranger had clawed his way toward the road. Caleb remained in treatment at Richmond Children's Heart Center, growing stronger by inches, not miracles that made headlines, but the kind that nurses notice first. One more bite of breakfast, 5 more steps down the hall, a laugh that lasts a second longer than yesterday. Ranger recovered beside him under a special hospital visitation arrangement, and no one who saw them together ever called him just a dog. He was a witness, a guardian, a bridge built from fur, memory, and grace. Noah visited every other day, though he told himself each time it was only to check on the case. Emily saw through that by the second week. Cole saw through it sooner. Caleb saw through it immediately. One afternoon, as snow began falling lightly beyond the hospital windows, the boy looked up from the picture book balanced on his knees and asked, "Captain Noah, do you have a family?" Noah glanced toward Ranger, who had lifted his head as if the question concerned him too. "Not the way most people mean," Noah said. Caleb nodded, accepting the answer with the serious mercy only children seem to carry. "Maybe you could start with us." Noah looked away toward the window, where the snow touched the glass and melted into clear lines. He had survived war, loss, and years of silence, but that simple sentence nearly undid him. Months later, when Caleb was strong enough to leave the hospital, a small ceremony was held on the edge of Briar Glen, where the old training property had been turned over to a nonprofit for retired working dogs and children of fallen service members. Emily stood near the new gate. Cole stood beside a row of deputies and volunteers. Caleb, still thin but smiling now, held Ranger's leash in one hand and Noah's sleeve in the other. Above the entrance hung the old piece of fence, sanded smooth but left with its scars visible. Beneath it, Noah had carved a line by hand. Some fences break because lost souls are trying to find their way home. No one clapped at first. They simply stood there in the cold afternoon light, reading the words, understanding more than they said. Then Ranger leaned against Caleb's leg, and Caleb leaned against Noah, and the three of them stood together as if they had always been shaped for that exact place. Later, when the crowd had gone and the sun dropped low behind the trees, Noah sat on the porch of the small caretaker's house, while Caleb slept inside under a quilt Emily had brought from her mother's cedar chest. Ranger lay at Noah's feet, breathing deep and even, his paws twitching softly in a dream that no longer seemed to be running from anything. Noah reached down and rested a hand on the shepherd's head. The dog opened one amber eye, calm and certain. In that quiet, Noah finally understood the last truth Ranger had carried from the beginning. Some promises do not end when the person who made them is gone. They wait in the grass. They bleed into memory. They survive cold mornings, locked gates, and names torn from collars. And sometimes, when the world has almost forgotten how to be merciful, God sends the answer down a lonely road on 4 tired paws.